There she is.
I was like, how do I make myself not look technologically challenged with but anyway, I've got the camera going. Anyway, all good. How are you?
I'm well, darling. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I've got my tea, can't complain.
I know. I had Berna ask me. I sent her a little package, and it was the little cuppa, and or the cup, and it hasn't arrived on time. So she's had to improvise and use her own from home today.
It's all right. I will make sure I use it when it comes, but unfortunately, this is just going to have to do for now.
So what's been happening? Has it been raining where you are today, or cold?
Do you know what? Are you in Sydney? Are you in, like in New South Wales?
Yeah, Hunter Valley.
Okay, so not in Sydney, but you're in New South Wales.
Nice.
It was so like completely a turnaround from like the last week that we've had. It was pouring here today.
Yeah, right. Oh, we would have loved the rain, but it's just been cold and windy and just, yeah, it's like, aren't we nearly in summer? Like,
I swear, but oh, actually, we're in November now. But I was going to say, I feel like September and October are always those months where we get like ripped off a little bit because we think we're building up to summer and it just gets so much more cold and more rain than we had previously.
true, true. And the wind this time of year is horrible. So bad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess for those who don't know you, I reckon that I would describe you as someone who is very into culture, into fashion, and I know you're very big with your poetry, and that probably stems back because when you're not on here creating stuff, you are a English teacher, is that right?
Yeah, I'm an English teacher. So I'm such a word nerd. I love anything to do with words.
Yeah, right. So how did you get into teaching?
I feel like it was, in my background, okay, where I come from and with an Arab mum, you have to go to university. Like there's no choice there. It's just the next thing that you have to do. And so whether you like it or not, that's just the pressure that's put on you. And I had all these different things that I was interested in, but I desperately, desperately wanted to do something that made me feel like I was still with all my friends in school. And I just wanted to go back to school, and I just saw it was the wrong reason, but I saw the opportunity of I could go get a job back in my high school and stay, connected to where I have attachment issues. And so I just decided. And then when I was in the degree, I got put onto like placements. For anyone that doesn't know, like when you're doing teaching, they put you on what they call practicals. And I realized that you can, a lot of people go into certain professions to make a difference, especially in things like the medical field. You can do that in teaching as well. So I stuck it out and became a teacher. And yeah, the result is questionable, but here we are.
So you've got on your profile on Instagram that you are Australian made from imported ingredients, which I love that. So for those who don't know you, tell us about your background and when you say important ingredients, fill us in a bit.
So yeah, definitely Australian made, born and raised in Sydney, Australia. But my father is from Ireland. He was actually born in Ireland, and that he came out here when he was a teenager. My mother was born in Australia, but to Palestinian parents, and they fled the war and went to Lebanon, and then from Lebanon to Australia. And yeah, so I was raised with, culturally speaking, very different parents. Oh, I suppose very different parents in general, but two completely different cultures, mainly with my mum's culture.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're half Arab, half Irish.
You're right. Yeah, I have to say, I don't think I've ever met anybody before with that type of background. So that's really interesting. Yeah. So I guess, and you take so much from both sides, don't you? Because it's just I know you call yourself the Celtic Arab, which is beautiful, and I'm Irish as well on my side, on my dad's side. So I love that. But tell us what it was like, I guess, at school and being so culturally probably maybe different, I guess, in a sense to those that you might have been at school with. Like that would have been challenging, was it? Or
I feel like the challenge actually, if you're gonna contextualize it in terms of school, the challenge was probably that I was different without realizing why. See, I grew up with my mum wasn't, especially growing up, wasn't very proud of her heritage. So it wasn't something that she taught and culturally practiced
Okay.
quite avidly. So there were these inherent differences naturally, you know, whether it be as a product of nature or nurture, there were differences.
Yep.
And then,
Yep.
you know, you take those differences into a classroom, school environment, and you are inherently different, and you don't realize really why. You don't resonate with an understanding as to why. And that in of itself is confusing, and you have to try and figure out. So that was hard in that sense because, you know, all these other kids are allowed to go out after school and go have sleepovers at their friends' houses. They're allowed to go to parties. They're allowed to have boyfriends. They're allowed to go on school camps. And you're not. And you have to try and navigate that and try and figure out, you know, why your circumstances have to be so different.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, right. So, how did you get onto social media? Tell us about your story of how you got here in this crazy world.
Well, social media is a funny one because initially, like so many of us, I got onto social media because we were all in lockdown and, you know, COVID was happening and I was bored. And I'm not someone who can sit still. I don't enjoy being bored. I don't enjoy not having something to do. So I had all of a sudden this spare time on my hands and I was like, "Do you know what? Let's go on social media." And then casual content making made me realize that I could actually do something with this. So the second answer to why I ended up on social media was because I wanted to talk about, you know, or be a part of rather the people talking about advocacy for victims of child abuse. And I was like, you know what, I can actually do something with this rather than just simply being on it because I'm bored. So yeah, it's a twofold answer. In all honesty, I got on because I was bored and then stuck around because I was like, do you know what? I would like to make something out of this.
You're right. Well, you talk to us a bit more about that side of it, about the what you do for those that have gone through a similar thing. I don't want to step out of line here. So you
No. I am
with
an open book. My heart is on my sleeve. I've already put my story online. It's all good. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but honest to God, I'm all right.
all right. Well, Howard, why don't you talk to us about what it is that you on that side of it that you are comfortable talking about? Because I would love to hear more about the things that you do online and the space that you create for people. I think it's beautiful.
Thanks. Like my see the thing is I'm not really a niche creator, unfortunately. Sometimes I wish I was because I think it would be easier if you just stuck to a theme. But I talk about, like you said, culture and, you know, my respective cultures and fashion and poetry. But I mostly for the well, not mostly, but I would preoccupied with the content around advocacy for victims of child abuse. So, long story short, I had a bit of a crap go with my childhood. My mother and her boyfriend were abusive in more than one way. And growing up, I didn't have, and social media wasn't what it is now, but I didn't have a kind of guiding voice and I didn't have someone that I could easily go to or anyway, in any way, someone that I felt safe going to that wasn't going to turn me into my mom and go, hey, you know, your daughter's saying XYZ, because that did happen to me once, which I can come back to. But essentially, I'm not sick or crying. My nose is just running. I'm one of those people. And essentially, I decided when I was on social media that I would like to create content that helped people feel like they were understood or that they could relate to certain things and feel seen and feel like that we could vicariously heal together as a community, because it was so needed when I was growing up. And thankfully, social media makes it easier now for content like that to be accessible to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right. So, you're 100% right though. Like I think I started just lip syncing and doing just, you know, stuff just to fill in time. And then I was sort of the same as you. I kind of grew quite quickly in the beginning and was sort of like, well, I've got this. I should actually use it for good. So, you know, a bit of humor, a bit of sharing our own stories. And I think that's something that social media is very like allows us to do is, like you said, connect with everybody, to be able to share, and for people to not feel like they're going through stuff alone, that there is other people out there that, you know, unfortunately have been through something similar, but it just helps bring those people together. And I suffer with secondary infertility, so for me to be able to put my story out about that was quite healing in a way, because I could talk about it in a place and know that my words were being heard by people who had also struggled. And again, we come together, we all sort of talk about it, so it becomes a really good, I don't know, a really good outlet too, just to be able to talk about it, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Like you often, well, I shouldn't generalize. Often in my experience growing up, you're often told to like heal in silence or cope in silence. And that I don't necessarily think, like I see merit to it if it works for the person. I see that if, you know, just being quiet and keeping to yourself works for you, then okay. But I actually think not only for yourself can it be quite therapeutic if you try and heal in a communal way, but actually, and like you said, it's unfortunate, but actually if you come together with a group of people that have also unfortunately gone through something like or similar to what you have, and you heal together because you share your story, you're not alone anymore, all of a sudden you just feel like you can do this together. And something that once might have felt, and perhaps even at times still feel incredibly difficult to navigate, you don't feel as alone, you don't feel as scared, because all of a sudden now you know you've got people that value you and hear you and believe in you and want you to be happy.
Exactly. And it's not just up in here where you think it's, oh, it's just me, or there's something just wrong with me. It's that validation of knowing that, you know, I think that's such a big thing. Tell us about when would you say it was at school where you sort of were dobbed into your mum about talking about it, like when you tried to open up about it?
When I was in primary school was worse than high school in terms of the teacher's response. My high school was actually much, much better. For the most part, my high school was really, really good in how they tried to help. But in primary school, I'm a teacher now. And when I reflect, I actually don't know how, legally speaking, at the minimum, legally, how that they were allowed to do this. But essentially, upon reflection, if I look back at younger me and where I was at, I was in a really desperate emotional place, and I needed to talk to someone. I needed to get it out because I was not coping. And I eventually went and told my school deputy principal, like the second in charge. I know sometimes people that are watching are from different countries and they don't the language, so not the head like of the school, like the second in charge. And in Australia we call that a deputy principal. And I told him, and I built what I thought like this, you know, relationship with him where I could confide in him, and I was going and reporting and he was taking notes and all of these things were happening. And then eventually, I don't know what changed, but he went and had a conversation with the principal, so the one above him. And that evening they had already gone and called my mum and told my mum everything that I had spent weeks going and reporting to this deputy principal. And he told my mum, and essentially the principal turned around and said, you know, I think your daughter's just acting out for attention. You need to get this under control before she gets you in trouble. And for context, I'm not defending them because what they did was wrong. But for context, my mum is, I promise you, if she was sitting here today, butter, as my Irish family would say, butter would melt in her mouth. Like, you would believe it. The manipulation is so believable. And I assume that they just thought that there was no way my mum was capable of doing anything that I was saying. And so they told her, I got in the car and hell was unleashed. And I never spoke to anyone again until years later, where I was in high school, and the abuse had gotten worse because now my stepdad was involved. It wasn't just her anymore. When I opened up in primary school, it was just my mum at the time, whereas by this point now it was my mum and him. So I think at that point I was at a point where I was like, do you know what, I'm going to run the risk and try again. And this time they were much better about it. They were much more helpful.
Yeah, right. But isn't that just like, and you're right, it would be a hard thing for them to do, but at the same time, like now, thankfully, there's processes in place where they would just go, if someone was to confide into a teacher, would they, what's the steps that a teacher's supposed to take? Like obviously going back and telling the parents, if the parents are possibly causing the issue, would it
It's
that
not
they,
an option.
oh,
Yeah.
really? There's nothing there.
No. Sorry. You know how you're saying obviously going back and telling the parents if they're potentially the issue. Yeah, that's not an option. You're not allowed to go and say, "Hey, by the way, your child is saying this about you." So there are programs that, or training programs, I should say, that are in place for teachers in Australia anyway, where you have to attend in order to understand how to cope with children, especially in circumstances such as these. And you're taught immediately that you as a teacher do not have the right to question whether they are telling the truth or not. It is not up to you to figure that out. Now, whilst there is a chance, of course, people can make things up, that's not your problem, that's not your concern. Your problem or your issue is to make sure that you're doing whatever you can to protect the child. And the rest unfolds, figures itself out later, but it is your duty as a teacher to do right by the child. And so you have to report everything. It doesn't matter what it is. And this is something I think a lot of parents aren't made fully aware of. But the simplest and the smallest of things, everything teachers have to report. It's just gotten so out of hand over the years, the history of teaching, that I feel like have had to learn from previous mistakes, thankfully, and now have systems in place where we're overtly cautious. And so now you would have to report everything back to your principal and document everything, and anything that's extremely serious goes to docs.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, right. Well, that's very good that that's all in, that something like what you had to experience hopefully isn't happening to others. But do you know what? I wonder if you became a teacher to protect those because they, with what you'd experienced, do you ever think sometimes that maybe the path that you went down was to sort of heal little you?
Yeah, I think not initially. I would love to have such a beautiful story to tell like that. But initially, that wasn't the reason. But I did allude to it before when I was talking about my pracs. Initially, I went to become a teacher because I wanted to go back to my comfort zone, which was my high school. Even though high school wasn't perfect either, I think we all have our ups and downs in school, especially as teenagers, but it was still a comfort zone in comparison to the home I was coming from. So I wanted to become a teacher primarily for that. But then when I did those pracs and I realized if you like, the fortune you have as a teacher in trying to help kids, then I kind of sat there and reflected on the situation and was like, oh my God, like you can actually be the teacher that you didn't have growing up, at least not in primary school anyway. Yeah. So yeah, there is definitely became an element of that later on.
Yeah, right. So is it more primary or secondary that you teach, or a bit of both?
So in terms of my qualification, I'm a high school teacher. And then as the years went on, so I taught for years. I went overseas and taught. I came back to Australia and I changed to primary school. And then I ended up focusing on private tuition when COVID hit, because a lot of us that weren't permanent got cut. And I started focusing. I already was doing it anyway because I'm a piano teacher as well, like a tutor.
Oh, wow. You busy girl.
Yeah. So I started focusing on that, and now I primarily tutor and I just teach casually.
Yeah, right. Well, there you go. So what was it like teaching in the UK? How different is that to over here?
It is different. It's like I'm going to sound really, really like a typical Australian, okay? Because I feel like all us Aussies that talk like about our time in the UK, quote unquote, all sound like this, but it was amazing.
Yep.
It was brilliant and I loved every single thing about it. I'm not going to say that, it's better than Australia, but like I obviously have an element of bias here because I was so close to Ireland and I was close to my culture that I could connect with, and I felt this extreme sense of fondness. Also, I'm, again, typical Australian, or typical perhaps just of my age. I love to travel. So everything about being there was amazing. And the schools there are lovely. I taught in a variety of schools. They're just really, really nice. And I just had overall the best experience over there.
Have you been back to Ireland like with your dad's side of the family at all?
Yeah, I was really lucky actually. When I was working over there, I got to spend like 3 weeks over Christmas in Ireland with my dad's family, and it was the best thing. And I cried when I was at the airport. I just looked at my dad. I was like, I don't want to leave. I just want to stay here. It was amazing.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's so beautiful. So does any of Mum's family still reside over in Palestine?
Yes, so there's most of them fled, like the immediate family, the ones that I'm closely related to, they and their parents, like the previous generations that actually went through everything, they fled, and a lot of them ended up in Lebanon, and any that then left Lebanon ended up either going to Germany, America, or Australia. And but there is still a small amount that's left there at the moment, which I've never had the chance to visit. And honestly, I really don't know if I will be able to. But yeah, there is some there, but I unfortunately haven't had that luxury of connecting to the culture there like I did in Ireland.
Well, I hope that they're all safe and everything going on over there, and
Yeah,
that
thank you.
yeah. Um, so I wanted to ask you about actually, this is an interesting one. So I've seen a post you put up about being the eldest daughter. I am also the eldest daughter. And there is just so much, I don't know whether the trauma is the right word, but there
Oh.
is something that comes with that. And why do we need to be such people pleasers? And why do we have to like be the organizers for everything? Why are we this way?
What it is. Do you know, I've actually written a poem dedicated to eldest daughters, which I've not shared with the world yet, but in it, I reference how we end up becoming, at least in my experience, we end up becoming like substitute mothers, like stand-in mothers. And I don't know if it's because from the beginning we've had to mature earlier than the average child would need to as a consequence of being the eldest. So perhaps that is, what creates the people pleaser in us, because we start acting like mums well and truly before our time. I don't know.
There's a song, I'll have to share it with you. I think her name's Isabel, I can't remember her last name, and she wrote a song called Eldest Daughter. And in one of the lines in it, she sings about how if you're something along the lines of that, I'll go and grab my toolkit so that I can fix you. And I was just like, and when I heard this song, I was just like, oh wow. Like just
Yeah,
everything she said, I was like, oh, that's me, tick, that's me, tick. But
100%.
so this is going to be an out there question for you. I was scrolling through some of your stuff, and I want to know why the story behind your celebrity crush.
Oh, Mrs. Brown. Perhaps, look, I don't know if celebrity crush is the right one. I'm not crushing in the sense that I'm in love with him and that's the person I want to end up with. I'm in love with in the aspirational sense. That character is everything I hope to be as I get older. I better be that old granny sitting at my table, cracking little, naughty jokes with my cup of tea and my big cardigan, or else I want a refund.
When I seen that, I was like, oh, I've got to write that one down. That's going to be one I have to ask.
Yeah. Oh, I know again, there perhaps isn't, an underlying bias here, but honestly, that show is the I saw actually recently, sadly when Matthew Perry died, I saw a lot of people talking about how Friends is their comfort show, and I didn't realize that there was a term out there. And actually, as soon as I was reading that, and I'm sure a lot of us have felt like that about Friends, the show as well. But Mrs. Brown's Boys is my comfort show. That's the show I put on when I need or want to have these good vibes in the house.
I love that. It's beautiful. It is so funny though. Like I really quite enjoy it. I think it's
Yeah.
crack up. Have you ever did you see any of the live shows? When they
Yes.
came out? Yeah?
Yeah, in Wollongong. I went and saw their one in Wollongong. It was amazing. It was so good. Actually, oh my gosh, I met him after that show by accident. I have a photo
Really?
with him. Yeah. And I was I was in embarrassment. I walked up to him. I was like, I know you get this all the time, but I'm actually one of your biggest fans. And he's like, don't you all say that?
Fangirling. I love it. That's great.
Definitely.
Oh my Lord. So one of the things that you are known for is your fashion and your modest fashion. Talk to us about how you got like how that started and where the love for that came from. Because that's I find that very interesting.
So I'm actually really glad you asked this question because I want to talk about it more. It's like especially online. Modest fashion for me, it's not about, I suppose, an element of conviction, yes, but it's not about the fact that I feel like religiously that we need to cover up. I'm Christian, but I consider myself to be a very spiritual person. I think there is a raging hippie inside me. But but it's not really related to that. It's more so about claiming back my body for myself. I could change my mind tomorrow and I see nothing wrong with it, but I could change my mind tomorrow and be like, do you know what? I don't feel like dressing modestly. I want to dress like whatever. But I think as someone who I hate this word, but as someone who has an influence online, I feel like it's nice to be a part of the fashion, community online and tell people that don't necessarily feel comfortable showing parts of their body, but society makes them feel like they have to because it's trendy or it's in style or it's in fashion. And actually be like, no, if you don't want to, you don't have to. And it doesn't make you a grandmother. You don't look ugly or old for dressing like that. Actually, it's totally fine. And you can dress modestly and make it look whatever way you want to make it look. So like, I felt like it gave me back a sense of empowerment over my body. Not being empowered because I all of a sudden fit the ideal because I look a certain way that, society tells you is beautiful, but actually because I felt beautiful and comfortable in how much I was willing to give. Does that make sense?
It does, 100%. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's not, and no, it's got nothing against people that do it for religious reasons, but that's not primarily actually, I wouldn't even say primarily in any maintained reason as to why I'm doing this more than a year later. It literally gave me the power back to feel comfortable in my own body. And I know, and I respect the alternate argument that, you should feel confident or empowered in your body, no matter what it looks like, 1,000%. But not all of us have got there yet. Not all of us feel like my legs, for example, my legs are covered in spider veins. It's a problem I've had since I was a kid because of my childhood, which is a whole other thing. But my legs are covered in spider veins. And I'm Australian. I used to go to the beach regularly and feel embarrassed and be like, oh my God, I have to wear what is culturally accepted at a beach, a bikini, maybe some shorts. But I always hated that everybody had access to looking at the parts of me I didn't want them to look at. Yep. And so when I realized that, I can embrace modest fashion, and the first time I went to the beach wearing, a modest swimsuit, I felt amazing. I was like, I don't have to give that to anybody that I don't want to. I felt so good. It was great.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's so
beautiful. Thanks.
So what's your go-to? Like what's your go-to outfit that you'd put together to go, out and about or out for dinner or something? What's your favorite combination?
I don't know. I think lately, as I've gotten older, entered into my 30s, I'm starting to get out of the jeans world. I know in my 20s I lived in my jeans, and I'm absolutely in love with. Remember I said earlier, inside there's a raging hippie. I'm in love with my flowy dresses and skirts, and I love that cottagecore vibe. I think that's actually like the inner Celt, that wants to dress like, the way the Celts did when they were doing like their end of harvest festivals and things like that. So, probably anything that's like long and flowy, be it a long skirt, a long dress, or maybe like a long cape. I love material. I love all that flowy, feminine, pretty vibes.
I love the capes, and that was one of the little things I put in your promo. Like, oh, yeah. I love that. I am very, very self-conscious with my upper arms. Like I like to refer to them as my tuck shop lady arms. And when I wave to somebody, I'm still waving. They're waving 5 minutes later. So
Do you know, actually, I actually feel you 100%. It's in my family. All the women in my family say like it's just a thing that we have. And honest to God, I could lose as much weight as I want. That will always be there. I was vegan for a period of time, and that was when I was at my lightest, and they were still saying hello to the world. They never went away.
I'm glad it's not just me. But no, they are just horrible. So yeah, I always I feel more comfortable wearing something to the elbow because I just feel like and a bit like I also have what they call saddlebags. So instead of so on the side of my hips, they sort of like stick out a little bit, sort of as if you're, you know, a horse with a saddlebag on it. It's got that little bit of extra booty.
I love these nicknames.
So I've got that going on. So my shape, I'm actually got sort of like quite a smaller waist, which goes like that. And then I go out like this and then I go down again. So I have this horrible shape that it's taken me a long time to be, I wouldn't say I'm still comfortable with it, but I'm getting better. And even just understanding how to dress to my shape, like getting you know, like a top that might go down just past my butt or something like that, just sort of so it doesn't stick out as much. And there's just to be self-conscious is in your 20s and in your early teens is just like full front and center. Now I'm 39, I'm 40 next year, and I just find that now I'm at that point where I'm like, this is what I've got to work with, and I've just got to make it work and be comfortable
100%.
in my own skin.
I'm all on board with the body positivity movement. I wish us 90 babies with those disgusting magazine covers that we used to see growing up had this movement back then. However, I do think that it's an unrealistic expectation for people to just wake up one morning and go, that's it, nothing bothers me anymore. I'm you know, it takes time, and so having a sense of style that makes you love your body, makes you feel comfortable in your body, is such a good thing to support and foster.
100%, because it's just it's funny you said about the spider veins. My family, it's hereditary in it too, and I haven't got it as bad, but yeah, it's just those things like that that just really they do make you self-conscious. And it's, you know, and I understand where you're coming from with that. Are you going to have any surgery or anything on them? Like, are they sort of, they stick out? Is it something you're going to get?
I don't have varicose veins. I don't have any of the ones that bulge, but I do have the like clusters. I've just the spiders. So I have clusters of the thin colored ones. And I've not, it's not surgery, but I've had the procedure, or however you term it. I've had those injections that they put into the vein to kill it, to stop it from resurfacing. Mine is really, really bad. Like it's almost everywhere. It literally looks, at this point I should just get like sleeves tattooed on my legs and just blend it, because honestly it would look better. but like, I've done it before, and the thing is, the pain is not worth it. The pain is, I've had, not that they're really worth talking about, but I've had 2 tattoos, and I've had laser, I've been, you know, waxed, I've had piercings. Anything that I can conjure that I had to endure pain from, nothing compares to that. Nothing. Like the needle is so long, and I promise you they are putting it almost all in, and it is just the astronomical pain that I am not willing to keep going through when it's not permanent. They don't tell you this, it's not permanent. They come back elsewhere. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'll do it again, and it's expensive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, right. Yeah, sorry, I thought that's what you meant, varicose veins. But yeah, I know what you mean about the spider veins. I think I have some of those near my ankle, actually, like the little tiny ones. Yeah. Why aren't they? There you go. So I also want to ask, I know we covered COVID, was sort of why you got online and stuff like that, and I know that like the reasons for you sharing and using your platform as it is. But do you think without COVID you would be here talking about this stuff? Do you think you would have found this online space?
I don't know, because I think it would have been something that I would have, without all that spare time that I had then, I would have just put it into the I don't have time basket. I would have, because I work full time and I had all these other things that I, like side projects, so to speak, that I was working on, and different goals in life. But for all that spare time that I was like, yeah, I could give this a go. I don't know. I would like to think, when I realize now what's come of it, that perhaps I would.
Yep.
But probably not, because it just, especially in the beginning, when you get to get your, to get the ball rolling, you need to put in so much time. And I don't know if it's something that I would have navigated well without all that initial time.
Yeah, right. You've got a really big following on Facebook. Do you post different stuff on Facebook to what you do on here?
No. So the only thing that probably gets more content out of me than any other app is Instagram.
Yeah,
but
right.
In general, I know a lot of creators talk about this, but it's too hard, especially if you have another job. It's too hard to make content specific to different apps. Yeah. So I just, whatever I post on one app gets put on all apps. Now, the only thing that I'm going to consider doing, which I've kind of started, I did start a year ago. I don't know if you remember, I was doing Tea with B on my lives.
Yeah.
And I was posting them on YouTube as long form content. I might continue doing long form content, not necessarily Tea with B, but I might do other things. Like recently I uploaded a vlog from a wedding that I went to. But in general, no, the same content is on all the platforms.
That was a gorgeous wedding too. I watched that. That was next level.
I don't know if I will ever see a wedding like that again. It was amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. So what else is coming up for you? What else can we expect? Or you can't talk about it yet.
I'm such a bad liar, because as soon as you started, I was just like, well, there is something. And then I was like, wait, I don't know if I'm really allowed to talk about it yet. There is something. All I can really say is I am an English teacher, and it's something that has been years in the making. And I have been slowly releasing more of my work online. But there is something that is about to be given to the world that I'm very, very excited about. And I'm very, very grateful to be finally being able to give this. So yeah, something is coming.
Because I've seen the channel was created on Instagram. So I'm doing that, eagerly awaiting. I thought I'd just try my luck and see if I get something out of you tonight.
It's something. I'm sure a lot of people can, with the little hints, I'm sure a lot of people can make educated guesses, but I can't really say fully what it is yet, but it is something.
Interesting. I like it. So talk to me about the poetry side of things, because that's obviously a creative outlet for you. That's something a little bit different. And just, talk to us a bit about that and where your inspiration comes from with all of that, because I find that really fascinating.
Poetry, and I think this can be said about many cultures, but poetry is something, and I didn't know this when I first started, but it's something that's quite big in both my cultures. Like, it's something that you can trace back to our literary cultures for hundreds of years. There are famous Irish poets, famous Arab poets, and they're look, poetry in general I love, but they're quite lovely, and it's something, as someone who's proud of my culture, I like to add to these cultural elements. I like to be a part of these things, but I didn't know that when I first got into poetry. Now, this is going to sound like completely uncanny, but I've had a love of rhyming since I was in high school. And if you go back and look at some of my old Instagram posts when I first finished high school, my captions were all rhyming. Like, it's just a thing I've always enjoyed doing. And it wasn't really something that I got into until 7 years ago, when I went on my first trip. Not the second one when I stayed over there for work, but on my first trip when I went to Europe, I was with my grandparents, and I was only about 2 years post running away from home. And my grandparents my grandparents always wanted to go to Europe, and they didn't have anyone to go with, and I wanted desperately to travel, so we went together. And I think for a really sheltered child, like for someone at the time that had seen Campbelltown, I grew up in Campbelltown. For someone who'd only really seen Campbelltown, and I promise you, growing up, I'd seen the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge like once, and I was 22 at this point. I'd seen nothing. I went overseas, and it was as if like I had blinders on my whole life, and all of a sudden like, life just looked and felt, so amazing. And in general, life was inspirational to me, especially history. You'll appreciate as an Australian, unfortunately, like we have a beautiful lengthy history if you think of the Indigenous community, but in terms of physical history that you can actually, like tangible history, it's not like what you would get in Europe in terms of the buildings and the archive of collated of books and artwork, etc. And so being inundated with history when I traveled was so inspiring, and it kind of healed a huge part in me in an ironic way, perhaps, because you wouldn't expect that to be what did it. And I have not stopped writing since. Since that happened, all of a sudden, Vincent van Gogh, like one of the most famous like painters, the sunflower painting, he said there is poetry all around us. And actually, I agree with that. All of a sudden, once I started writing, I just realized if you fall in love with life and you see, I'm such a hippie, if you see magic in almost everything, then that magic can be almost poetic. If you think about it, it's no longer just a bird. It's more than that. Like it's got a message to it. So poetry, it fills a void.
That's beautiful. When you travel, what was your favorite place that you've been?
I know when I say this, I take people by surprise, and it's not for any other particular reason than simply because of the inspiration, because of what I experienced as a person. But England changed my life. I know my ancestors are rolling in their graves right now, but England is not responsible for the actions of their previous governments, right? I know people say you're Palestinian and you're Irish. How can you like England? England is beautiful. They have a beautiful culture there. And next to England, I would say Ireland. Like London gave me an inspiration that I couldn't get here, and it made a writer out of me. So when people ask me, this question, and I say England, and they're shocked, England made me like who I am. And that was something that was so hard to do when you consider where I came from. But England brought out inspiration in me that turned me into a writer, and that made me like myself. So it will always be England, and followed very closely, if not almost on par with Ireland.
That's beautiful. So did you have much exposure to your Irish heritage when you were growing up, or it was sort of more once you reconnected with your dad that you got to experience that?
I always obviously knew that I was Irish, and the brief moments that I had with my dad for those first 22 years when I was with my mum, he made sure that I was well and truly aware that we were Irish and this is our culture, and he gave me that, brief cultural education. And my mum, this is something I probably don't talk about enough, and perhaps I should. My mum, although was majority of the time intolerable to grow up with, she had moments where I feel like it's almost like my mum was two different people. And, this 1% of the time, which was a rarity, she would kind of pause and realize, like, crap, like I'm being insufferable. And she would have, I remember these two moments where she was like, you're Irish, and I want you to make sure that you're educating yourself on both cultures. Remember, my mum didn't particularly like her own culture. And so she bought me this big, massive book. I remember there was this secondhand bookstore she went to regularly. And she bought this massive book from there on Irish history, and I devoured it. And I loved it. And I just remember, I think Irish culture was a sense of escapism for me growing up, because it was the thing that I had access to that wasn't from there. It was something else that I could attach to, that was my little haven, and it wasn't to do with where I was or what I was coming from. And then when I ran away, my dad obviously gave me more exposure to the culture, but I didn't have a lot of access to it growing up at all.
Yeah, right. That would have been a really difficult time for you, leaving when you did. How old were you when you got away from home?
I was 22 years old.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. I know. A lot of people, I think, when they hear that and they're like, 22 years old, like, you're an adult, like, that's not running away, that's just moving out. If you consider culture and if you consider circumstances, because sometimes culture doesn't even matter. If you're in an abusive environment, you feel trapped. Like the victim, often, it's not even just victims of child abuse, it can be even victims of domestic violence. A lot of them are manipulated in such a way as to feel like they are trapped, or as to feel like they don't deserve any better. So a lot of the time you'll have grown women in scenarios where they might even, unfortunately have children, and they might feel like they can't leave, and they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and they don't leave, and people blame them. People have no understanding of the situation at all. It's not about the fact that, you're simply an adult. Mental health is something that you need to seriously consider where someone's at in terms of their capabilities. So I was 22, definitely a legal adult, but I didn't feel like I had the rights. I didn't feel like I had the freedom to leave. And actually, I don't even think I could have done it when I did it at 22 if it weren't for the friend that was backing me and helping me go, and, morally supporting me through it.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Poor bugger. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing so well now, considering everything you've been through. I do have a question about your Arab side. If Mum wasn't very forthcoming with your heritage on that side of things, how did you sort of learn about that and where you came from?
So when I obviously still had the exposure to it, regardless of my mum's fostering of it. Like, I still had her parents and other family members that were still, quite prevalent with how they practice their culture, and that obviously rubbed off somewhat to me. But really what happened was, when I ran away from home, I had a lot of healing to do, and I had a lot of what I like to call figuring myself out, trying to see myself through my own lens, not through the person my mum told me I was, not through the person that my mum made me think I was, and rather just reflect on who I am inherently, and not figuring myself out as in finding myself, but rather creating myself, like becoming who I wanted to be. Yep. And I started to realize I lacked a lot of knowledge of my own background, so I sought it out myself. I actually went and I used to sit with my teta, my Arab grandmother, and I used to ask her questions about where we come from and her story. I used to film the videos actually and post them later on. But initially I used to get her to give me the recipes of our culture, and I used to get her to talk to me about how we wear kufiyas and the tatris and all these different things, and I sought it out. I went to university to study Arabic. I went to belly dancing classes. All these things, as if you like, healing mechanisms to fill these voids and try and make sure I, like I said, figured myself out and became myself.
No, I love that. And your videos that you do where you're playing two parts when you do, I love them. Your skits, they're just like, I've learnt so much about both of your backgrounds purely just from your videos. Like, I think I've learnt more about the Irish side of things from you than I have in my own family.
Thanks. No, I love it. A lot of people think that those videos, and sometimes they are, but a lot of people think that those videos are specifically imitating my parents, but actually a lot of the time I'm imitating my grandparents. Because they were usually the ones that contrasted the most.
Yeah. So who has the thickest Irish accent? Where do you model that from? Is that dad or is that your grandfather?
Biggest Irish accent in my family. Well, obviously it would be the ones in Ireland, but I don't know. My Irish family, like my grandparents definitely have. They have a real, they have a strong Irish accent, but it's softened over the time that they've been in Australia because I think they spent the first 40 odd years of their life in Ireland, and I think they've spent about 35 or something so years in Australia. So their accent has softened in comparison. But it would definitely be my grandparents, but I'm mostly imitating my family in Ireland, not the ones that are here.
The way that you bounce between your accents and stuff too, you just do it so easy. So it's so flowy.
I don't know how or why. It's just always been me, and like online, I will only do the Australian or the Arab accent. But like in general, like I'm an Aussie, and I love to play around with the Australian accent sometimes, and it's just me. I don't know where it go, why. I just enjoy it. It's a bit of fun.
You can just hear that as you talk. It's like a little bit of this one will pop in, and then this one, and then it's so pretty to listen to. I love it.
Thanks.
So,
Yeah.
so let's talk about food because I'm a foodie. I'm a bit of a foodie creator. I want to know what's something that's on rotation for you at the minute. What are your go-tos?
Oh, actually, right, like on to just from today, I made gufta. I don't know if you or anyone knows what that is, but basically, it's kind of like our version of like a sausage, of like or like kind of. So it's essentially just mince meat, and you mix it with parsley and onion and seven spices and salt, and you blend it all together, and then you can fry it if you like as like meat patties or like sausages. Sometimes we spread it on like you know what manouche is. You flatten it on like our bread. I don't know if you'd have it in Hunter Valley, but it's everywhere in Sydney.
Okay.
Yeah, and like you would eat. I'm eating that so much. And then that's kind of what's on repeat at the moment for me because I'm really low in iron and I need to eat red meat.
How did you go from being a vegan to come back to eating meat again?
So being vegan wasn't my choice. My mum, the last 2 years that I was living at home, my mum saw a documentary that kind of revolutionized our family environment, and the whole family was made to go vegan. Now, don't get me wrong, like there is an element of it that I've often kept within me where I reflect sometimes, and I am in no way pushing anything on anyone, but sometimes as I don't know. I feel like I would still feel like this even if I hadn't gone through the vegan experience. But sometimes I do sit there and I feel bad and I'm just like, oh my God. Like, especially I live on a farm and sometimes I look at these animals and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like I feel really guilty right now. But when I left home, I was sick. Like I was not healthy at all. My immune system was disgusting. And my iron was really, really bad. And the doctor even said to me, if you do not fix your iron, you need to go and get infusions. So I had no choice. I had to go back and I had to fix my diet. And I don't know if there's any vegan in an Irish household, to be honest. It was very soon after I think within a few days, to be honest, after I ran away from home, my grandparents put a chicken sausage on my plate and they were like, right, you're gonna eat that. And I was like, okay.
Oh God, I love it. Just sitting your, it's gonna sort you back out, love. No infusions for you.
Thank God, because that's not something I wanted to go and have to deal with.
Oh, um, when it comes to the food on both sides of your like the Arab side and your and the Irish side, what's something that you love from both? Like what's a non-negotiable in both sort of cuisines?
Um, I grew up with my Arab culture, so the food, especially as someone like as someone as an adult that now has to cook for herself, I know a lot of the Arab food. That's my go-to. That's the thing that I tend to cook the most. But my favorite, I like the way that we cook our meats. It's not a dig at any culture. I like the way we spice our food. So that is my go-to. However, my favorite thing to eat is soup. I think it's a comfort thing. I love soup. In my Middle Eastern culture, we have what we call shorbatadas, which is this like lentil soup. My favorite soup that we make. However, no one does soup like the Irish. No one does soup like the Irish. Like in every restaurant, in every house, in every cafe you go to in Ireland, there's always a house-made, a homemade soup. And it's so good for you because it's like real veggies that they blend. It's not just stock and something, like it's veggies and things that they blend in, and brown bread. It's always soup and brown bread. So I think my go-to in life is generally soup, and I have my Irish family to thank for that.
I love that. My husband's a very big soup person. I like soup. I do, but I don't know whether I could eat it every day. But Joe could. He loves soup. I don't make it as much as I should.
A lot of people, like when I tell them I love soup, a lot of people look at me and they're like, "That's what we have when we're sick." And I'm like, well, I like it all the time. So yeah, I
True,
love it.
isn't it? Oh, chicken soup every time someone's sick.
Oh, but how good is chicken soup?
It is.
I know there's a million and one ways to make it, but it is so good.
Oh God, I love that. What about desserts? Talk to me about like Arab desserts, because I reckon that would be something so elegant and just over the top. Is it gorgeous?
I am the wrong person to talk to about sweets. I don't have much of a sweet tooth. It's not, I like sweets, but I'm 1000% a savory person. We go out for breakfast and people order pancakes and waffles. I'm all over the eggs and toast and whatever, it's like sausages and all of that stuff, like a big Irish breakfast. That's
Yep.
where I'm at. But that's not to say though that the sweets in Arab culture are not amazing. But lewa, it's how we say baklava is amazing. It's so good, especially if you get it from the right places. And kenefe, I'm Palestinian, so that's our traditional sweet, and it is so good. If you love cheese, which can be confusing for some people because cheese is generally a savory thing, but if you like cheese, it's dripping in this like syrup, and it's a cake, like a cake, and it's so yum. So good.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna have to do some more digging into this, I think, because I love me some cheese.
Do you know what? If you're ever in Sydney, I know where to take you, and we will go, and I'll take you, and I'll show you what kenefe is.
We need to do that because I'm only like 2 hours from Sydney, so we're gonna have to lock this in and do this. That would be amazing. I'd love that.
Hunter Valley is lovely too, though. I've only ever been there once, but it is lovely. It's a really nice place.
It is. It is nice. We don't live that far from the vineyards, but like I only go there for, I don't know, weddings or, like there's something on in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we very rarely take advantage of all the restaurants and stuff. But yeah, I think it's like anything where you live, like I lived in outskirts of Brisbane for a while, and I was only like a hop, skip, and a jump from the theme parks, but like I would never go to the Gold Coast or go anywhere. Like it wasn't until some people come up and like, oh, we should go here. I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'd never been to Australia Zoo and I lived there for 3 years. Like it was just things, you know what I mean? Like you don't do touristy things in places you live, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. When I came back from the UK and I moved back to Australia, I was like, right, I'm going to travel around Australia the way I traveled around Europe while I was over there. Yeah, listen, I'm still intending on doing it. But it's very expensive to travel in Australia, but I feel you.
Where do you want to go? Where would your first place stop be if you were traveling around Australia?
My favorite, I have, like, in fairness, I have done the east coast of Australia. I've done all the capital cities, and I've done like the main touristy things along the east coast. Queensland has my heart. I think Queensland is the gem of what I've seen of Australia. And the Whit Sundays, I've been to Hamilton and Daydream Island.
Yep.
And they're everything I could ever hope to see in this country. There's just amazing. And I would go back there if I was wealthy all the time. It's just so beautiful.
You're right. I've never been to either of those places. Furthest up I've been is Where did we go? I can't even remember. Joe will yell out at me in a minute and he'll tell me. We went to Joe. Where was the furthest we've been up in Queensland? You'll probably type it here. Rockhampton. There he is. He just commented Rockhampton. So that's the furthest I've been north, and then I've been and done the Great Ocean Road when Sam was little,
Oh, lovely.
and that's about it.
Really?
So yeah, I'd love to trip around. I'd love to go to Tasmania. That's on my list. I'd love
Oh,
to go
it's
to
so
Tasmania.
beautiful. Tasmania is so, so beautiful. Like Australia is beautiful.